December 9th, 1942, Buna, Papua New Guinea. Through the torrential rain and suffocating jungle heat, Lieutenant Colonel Yoshiaki Yazawa watched the American soldiers advance across the swamp toward his fortified positions. The Japanese commander had studied intelligence reports on these troops. The 32nd Infantry Division, National Guard, citizen soldiers from Wisconsin, dairy farmers, factory workers, shop clerks playing at war. Yazawa's men, veterans of China and Malaya, had prepared killing zones in the kunai grass. His bunkers, built from coconut logs and packed earth, were invisible until you stumbled onto them. The Americans would break here, he was certain. They always broke in the jungle. The Europeans had. The Australians had retreated. These soft Midwesterners would run. What Yazawa didn't know, what Japanese intelligence hadn't grasped, was that he was facing the beginning of the longest sustained combat deployment of any American division in World War II. The men advancing through that swamp would fight for 654 consecutive days without relief. No rotation home, no extended rest. Just endless jungle, endless combat, endless casualties replaced by men who stepped into the line and kept fighting. The 32nd Division would spend more days in combat than the entire German Army Group Center spent continuously engaged on the Eastern Front. They would outlast every German division's deployment record. They would prove that American citizen soldiers possessed endurance that professional armies couldn't match. The rain fell, the jungle steamed, and the men from Wisconsin kept coming. They were writing a record of sustained combat that would stand unmatched in American military history, earned in the hell of the Pacific, where armies went to die, and somehow, impossibly, they just kept fighting. The 32nd Infantry Division had been federalized on October 15, 1940, transforming Wisconsin and Michigan National Guardsmen into federal troops. These were not career soldiers. They were men who had drilled one weekend per month, held civilian jobs, lived ordinary lives in small Midwest towns. Milwaukee brewery workers, Green Bay paper mill operators, Madison students, rural farmers who had never seen an ocean. By December 1941, they were stationed at Camp Livingston, Louisiana, training for a war that seemed distant until Pearl Harbor made it immediate. When the division shipped out for Australia in April 1942, many had never left Wisconsin. Within months, they would be fighting in conditions that made the Louisiana swamps seem comfortable. Japanese military doctrine emphasized spirit over material, Bushido over logistics. Their soldiers were trained for aggressive offense, expected to endure hardship stoically, and indoctrinated to prefer death over surrender. When analyzing American forces, Japanese intelligence consistently predicted low morale, poor discipline, and inability to sustain operations in harsh environments. The Americans, Japanese planners calculated, were too comfortable, too reliant on material support, too individualistic to maintain cohesion under jungle warfare's grinding attrition. German observers in Tokyo reinforced these assessments, sharing Wehrmacht experiences about American troops requiring excessive supply and breaking under sustained pressure. General Tomitaro Hori, commanding Japanese forces in Papua, confidently predicted in September 1942 that any American offensive would collapse within 2 weeks. His troops had defeated British forces in Malaya, routed Dutch defenders in the East Indies, and pushed Australian units to the brink of defeat. Americans would fare worse. November 19, 1942 marked the 32nd Division's entry into combat at Bunagona. This would be the first American ground offensive of the Pacific War, and it would introduce the Wisconsin men to a hell beyond anything training had prepared them for. The jungle wasn't a battlefield. It was a living entity that tried to kill you independent of enemy action. Temperatures exceeded 110 degrees Fahrenheit, with humidity approaching 100%. Rain fell in sheets that turned foxholes into drowning pools. Malaria, dengue fever, dysentery, and scrub typhus infected over 80% of troops. Men lost 30 pounds in weeks. Wounds didn't heal. Fungal infections ate through skin. The Japanese bunkers were invisible, their interlocking fields of fire perfectly designed. Each position required multiple assaults, close combat with grenades and flamethrowers, fighting often decided by bayonets and entrenching tools in hand-to-hand struggles inside bunkers filled with smoke and death. The 32nd Division attacked for 32 days straight at Bunagona. Companies that landed with 180 men fought with 40. Every advance measured in yards cost dozens of casualties. Replacements arrived, were fed into the line, and became casualties themselves within days. On January 22, 1943, after 64 days of continuous combat, Bunagona fell. The 32nd Division had suffered 2,734 battle casualties and over 7,000 disease casualties. Japanese defenders fought literally to annihilation, fewer than 50 surrendering from garrisons exceeding 5,000. Any other division would have been withdrawn for rest and reconstitution. The 32nd got 3 weeks before their next operation. By comparison, German doctrine rotated divisions out of line after 30 to 60 days of sustained combat. Wehrmacht units that exceeded 90 consecutive days in action were considered exhausted and combat ineffective. Soviet forces rotated even faster, recognizing that prolonged combat degraded unit cohesion fatally. The 32nd Division fought for 654 consecutive days. From November 1942 through September 1944, they were continuously in combat or combat preparation without returning to rear areas. They fought at Bunagona, Salamaua, Lai, Finschhafen, Saidor, Aitape, and into the Philippines at Leyte. The mathematics of endurance were brutal. A division arriving with 14,000 men would receive over 12,000 replacements during this period, meaning the average soldier served approximately 90 days before becoming a casualty. Yet the division never broke. New men arrived, absorbed the unit culture, and fought as effectively as the originals. Japanese commanders observing this phenomenon couldn't explain it. Yazawa, captured at Buna, told interrogators that his men were samurai, trained from birth for war, yet these Wisconsin farmers outlasted them. Americans should have broken, Japanese doctrine insisted, yet they never did. General Hatano Takushiro, chief of staff for the 18th Army, wrote in his diary after Aitape, "The American 32nd Division appears in every operation against us. They do not rotate. They do not rest. They simply continue, absorbing casualties that would destroy Japanese units twice, rebuilding and attacking again." This endurance contradicts everything we believed about American softness. The division's record exceeded every military standard for sustainable combat operations. The U.S. Army's own doctrine suggested 120 days as maximum sustained combat before units required extended rest. The 32nd fought 654 days. German divisions averaging 45 days between rotations couldn't match it. Even elite units like the 1st Marine Division, renowned for Guadalcanal, fought 112 consecutive days before relief. What the 32nd Division proved was that citizen soldiers, properly led and supported, possessed endurance exceeding professional armies. These weren't warriors by tradition or training. They were civilians who learned war through doing it and discovered they could endure longer than anyone imagined. The psychological impact on Japanese forces was devastating. The 32nd shoulder patch, a red arrow bisecting a line, became known to Japanese troops as the arrow that never stops. Captured documents revealed Japanese intelligence tracked the division obsessively, warning units when the 32nd entered their sector. One captured order from September 1944 stated, "The 32nd American Division approaches. This unit has fought without rest for 600 days. They are not normal Americans. Prepare for prolonged resistance. At Leyte, when the 32nd Division landed in October 1944, Japanese commanders recognized their patch and reportedly requested immediate reinforcement. The division that was supposed to break in weeks had become the enemy they feared most. The final accounting came on September 30th, 1944, when the 32nd Division was finally withdrawn from continuous combat after 654 days. They had fought in 11 major campaigns, suffered over 7,000 battle casualties with another 12,000 disease casualties, earned 4 Medal of Honor recipients, and accumulated more combat days than any American division would achieve in any war. At war's end, Japanese officers interviewed about American combat effectiveness consistently mentioned the 32nd Division. General Adachi Hatazo, whose 18th Army fought them repeatedly, stated, "We expected Americans to be individually brave, but collectively weak. The 32nd Division proved us catastrophically wrong. They possessed endurance we associated only with Japanese soldiers, yet maintained it while evacuating wounded, rotating leaders, and incorporating replacements. This combination of humanity and effectiveness we never achieved." The men of the 32nd Division returned to Wisconsin not as conquering heroes seeking glory, but as men who had simply done what was necessary for 654 days. They had proved that democracy's armies, dismissed as soft by totalitarian powers, could outlast and outfight anyone when the cause demanded it. Their record stands unmatched. No American division in World War II, Korea, or Vietnam would fight as many consecutive days. The citizen soldiers from Wisconsin, men who had never expected to become warriors, had set an endurance standard that professional armies couldn't approach, earning it yard by yard through Pacific jungles where they were supposed to break but never did.